I'm Jason.
I'm Julie.
And today on Dice and Dragons, we are going to be reviewing something that's a little bit different than our normal fare, I'd say.
I would say that too.
The game is CO2 Second, designed by Vital Lacerda, and it is published by Giochix.it. Now, this is the Kickstarter version of the game. We did get the Kickstarter exclusive content. We're not going to be covering that in the review. We really only focused on the cooperative version of the game, which we're going to get back to the table before we actually review it. And it's a little bit of a beast of a game, wouldn't you say, Julie?
I would agree. So this is a cooperative game.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 120 minutes to play, and I would say that definitely is the amount of time it's taken every time we've taken it to the table.
But it didn't really feel long. Like, there's games that are short that feel long. There's long games that
but it was
feel really long.
Yeah, this one was definitely 120 minutes. So it's a 1 to 4 player game for ages 14 and above. And, sometimes on the channel we say, maybe you can get away with it. I think for this one, due to the complexity of the moving pieces on how to play, I would definitely say I think this is a 14 and above game.
And I'd love to take credit for the comment, but I think the best way to describe the game is almost like you're working on a puzzle. And I'm stealing that from a Redditor that was on a post that I commented on. I'm drawing a blank on your username, but still trying to give you credit anyway. Now, there will be a release in North America. If I'm not mistaken, it is going to be released by Stronghold Games. Now, what is the best way to describe this game? So let's tell you about it before we teach you even more about it in detail. Well, in this game, what you're essentially doing, you are playing an energy company. Now, you're either taking this on solo, you're either playing it semi-cooperative, or cooperative, which is the way that we played it. Essentially, you're doing very similar things in all versions of the game. You are trying to manage the global CO2 level. In the competitive version of the game, you are trying to make sure that you're the one with the most points, but you still have to cooperate with the other energy companies because you can all lose if the CO2 level gets out of hand and you don't have any means of paying for those excess carbon emissions. Now, in the cooperative game, you are all working together. And there are definitely some differences. We just haven't yet got to the competitive version. And you're able to then gain income and victory points, which are very crucial because victory points are really how you're going to stay afloat. And the goal is really to survive for decades. You need to survive the 2010s, 2020s, 30s, and 40s. And then once you've survived all the decades, you need to complete the objectives. If you've successfully completed the objectives, you can look on the back of your card. There are 2 cards in the game that explain how to set it up, one for 2 to 4 players, one for 1 player, and it'll give you a nice little story as to how you did. But as you can see, just describing it, it took me a little while, especially to talk about all the different modes. And before I forget, I wanted to mention, so we have pre-recorded the how to play section of the video. I'm going to put it all together. I might release a chunk of it as a separate video. There's probably a very good chance it's all going to be put together. I'm going to see what the length is. As this is such a beast of a game, I was thinking about separating it, but setup time took a while. Teardown takes a while. So I want to really give you guys the best bang for your buck. With that being said, Julie, what is it time for us to do?
It's time to grab our drinks.
Yep.
Grab our best friends. And take it to the table.
Yeah, it's going back to the table for one last play before we give our final thoughts. Now this was very different than anything else we played.
Definitely.
I also think it really sort of suits some of the stuff that we like to do. It's all about protecting the environment, something that we actually do a lot around here. And my wife works very hard at it. We're eagerly looking forward to finally getting some composting. Now we're going to take a look at the components for CO2 Second. I'm trying something different due to the fact that this is such a large game in terms of table space, so the game is already set up. Now, if you have any questions about the game setup, we're going to just take a look at the rulebook quickly here. You can see the list of the components, the setup instructions, and I know some people are going to have questions. Page 22 and 23 of the rulebook here are all of your reference information as well as some stuff on page 24. Then you also have the solitaire rules. Now, this is a 2-player setup for the cooperative game. You can tell it's the cooperative game because of the handshake on this side of the board. If you flip the board over, it's almost identical, except there will be some small differences, and you'll see the competitive symbol. As we were reviewing the co-op, this is what we're showing you guys. Now, let's get into it. Here, we have our different stacks of money. We have the purple carbon energy permit tokens. We have our discs here, which are going to be going on the tracking information for how much technology we have in the different types of resources: recycling, forestation, water, solar, and wind. We have, and I'll pick them up, the types of energy that the different continents are trying to develop. As you can see here, what we have is Africa trying to develop solar, wind, and recycling. Now, the leftmost resource is the one that they are the most interested in. Now, this is the carbon energy permit market right here, and this tracks what they're worth. Over here, we've got the different types of power plants. You can see them here: forestation, solar, wind, water, recycling. Now, over on this side, we've got the different proposals. You can see once again, forestation, and it starts with level 1, level 2 is at the bottom, going through those same types as the power plants. We have our pool of scientists right here. The white tech cubes over there. Next to the white tech cubes is the score tracker marker, so it's going to track all of your victory points. Here we've got the decade tracker as well as the round tracker. The setup will explain what you need to do depending on the number of players. Here we've got the different energy summit talks that your scientists can attend that will help boost your technology. Don't worry, we'll explain all of that. Over here, and sorry that slid, we've got the different economic objectives, if I'm not calling that incorrectly, that we need to reach, such as build specific power plants, achieve specific technology in terms of where you get on these energy tracks, and here completing specific summits on different types of topics like wind, water, and a certain amount. So you can see there are some that are about 2 topics, some that are about 3. Now, here on this side, we have the pool where you're going to be drawing these different talks from. Once they're completed, you remove them and you will draw another one. We've got the negative carbon power plants that we do not want. You can see the value of this one here at 20. And then just the bank of carbon energy permits and our tracker over here to track the CO2 level. Now, we've covered all of the board components. Let's take a quick look at the player board components. What we have for the player board are these hexagonal markers here to track what region we control, the control cubes that are used in that as well, our hexagonal tracker to let everyone know what action we took during our turn, these 3 markers, which are the exact same, but they're used to track the different executive actions that we take. We have the 5 UN cards in white and blue. We'll take a look at that a little more later on. Here we've got the UN card setup, which tells us what we need to win and how we're going to set up based on the number of players. And you just got this nice little back of it, which will tell you how well you did during your game. First player marker right here. And then we've got the tech cubes on our board. And we'll just clear this stuff out so you can see how to set up your board. It'll tell you right here, 2 cubes, 2 CEPs, 1 scientist, and then whatever you start out as. For the first player, it's $3. You can see the number just barely visible down there. We'll put them back. And next to the player board, we've got the helpful turn information. Now, we've done it. We've taken a look quickly at all the components. I know it's a little different than what people are used to. Now what we're going to do is go through how to play. I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible as I explain the different things that you can do on your turn. So keep it right here, and we'll be back hopefully in the flash, or as fast as flowing water, as we are trying to build these new ecological power plants to save the world from the ever-rising level of CO2. Now we're going to take a look at the actions and how to play CO2 Second Chance. We're going to start with the executive actions, and then we're going to go into the main actions. The reason for that is that's how it is presented in the rulebook. Now let's see what we can do as an executive action. You notice that we've got 3 of these tokens right here, which means that we may take 3 executive actions. Now, one of those actions would be moving our scientists. Now, in order to do that, we will have had to have taken a main action and have a proposal set up on the board already, but that is one of the executive actions that we can take. We can choose to interact with the CEP market. We can sell one of our CEPs at the current market value, which is 3. We may also purchase a CEP by spending our money at the current market value, which is 3, which would then go onto our board. What is important to note is that if the CEP market has nothing left in it, the market will be closed. You will then take 2 from the bank, which is just a little far, so I can't do it. So I'll just use this for an example. You would take 2 from the bank and increase the price of the CEPs during your turn. Now, once the market is closed, you may not sell and you may not buy. These will only come back at the end of your turn. Now, the other thing you may do is play a card or pay tech cubes to purchase a UN card. So we'll take a quick look at the cards right now. The cards that you can play are these ones right here. Now they all mean different things. And if you need help, definitely check out the reference book. I just drew them randomly and I'll explain them. What this means is you can freely move your scientist to a talk on forestry. You'll see we've got the one over there in Seattle. And then you will gain 1 knowledge in forestry. In the case if I just played this, we would move the scientist from my board to the talk in Seattle and gain 1 knowledge in forestry. That's what all these different summit cards mean, as you can see here. Now with regards to infrastructure ones, it means that if we build infrastructure on a proposal area, we may then gain 1 level of recycling. As you can see, it's the recycling symbol. So that's how you will play the cards. You can tell what the action is up here because of the symbol. See, this one represents the infrastructure, and here you've got the talk symbol, which you can see over there on the board. And that's how you use these cards. But there's another way to use the cards. As you'll notice, there is a minor action that you can use by playing the card. So you can either take this main action here or use the minor action here. Now, once you do that, the card will be played face up next to your board. I'm just going to do it here. And you do have the option of moving your scientist, and not when he's out of talk. He's got to stay there until the talk is completed. But if he's on your board or on a proposal, which we'll show you shortly, you can move him to this area. He's then stuck there for the rest of the game, but you will gain that value, that $2. So that is those cards. Now here are the win condition cards. As you can see right here, they're secret. You're not allowed to discuss your cards during the game. It tells you what you need to do. In this case, you need to end the game with at least 3 of the white tech cubes. With this one, you need to have control in the regions that are listed below. So in this case, it would be North America, South America, and you need to have 4 CEPs on your board at the end of the game. Now, we've gone over it. We've talked about the executive actions. I know it might not be that clear with the scientist. I will talk a little bit more about it when I get to the proposal and the main actions, such as building infrastructure and building the power plant. So keep it right here, and we'll be right back because we're going to cover the main actions that you can do in CO2, and then we're going to go through the round structure after that. Now, what are the main actions that you can do in CO2? Well, there are 3 of them. And we'll start with the one that you need to do in order to be able to even consider doing infrastructure and power plant is you need to make a proposal. Now, when you make a proposal, I'm just going to reach over, grab one of these. You have to make it in an area that actually wants this type of resource. So everywhere on the board would like solar except for North America. Now, if you propose in this area, you would gain whatever the number of CEP is in terms of money. So in this case, I would gain $5 for Europe. And that's just one example. The other thing we could do is gain or move a scientist, meaning we could move our scientist if he was at another location with a proposal. And just for the sake of keeping the game actually working, I'll drop another proposal there. So you could move him from here to here, for example, or you may gain another scientist, add them to the board. And when you do that, you gain knowledge of any type of resource. So I could just decide to gain a knowledge of water. What's also and in this case, you would gain 2 tech cubes if, sorry, I moved that. You constructed the proposal there. Now, that's the example of all the different things you can gain from the proposals. In many cases, I found we've often started getting money in order to be able to build things, but scientists can be a good idea as well. So that's what would happen with a proposal. Now, the one thing I did not mention about the scientist, when you remove a scientist from a proposal to either another proposal or a talk, you gain one research in the type that they left. So let's just use this as a quick example of what may happen. This will be almost like 2 turns, but we make the proposal. I'm going to clean this up here. This was already out there. We'll say this was done by another player. Make the proposal for solar. We gain 1 in solar. We can then take, I neglected to do that, I apologize. We could move our scientists to this proposal. Then once we move them off, either to a forestry or to a talk, we would then gain another point in solar. All right, so we've explained the proposals, really how they work. Now let's talk about the next action, which is infrastructure. The way infrastructure works, you take a look at either what you have right here, your proposal, or the reference guide that you have on your chart here. You then pay 1 CP. So we pay this one. We would then flip this over. We gain the resource that it says, so this would be 3 white cubes. And we then set up the infrastructure. Now, once this has been built, we are able to build a solar power plant by paying the cost on the board to build the power plant. In the case of solar, it is $10, 1 CP, 2 cubes. We are then rewarded with 8 victory points, which we would move up the victory point track. I'm just going to move over, and we'll move it up the victory point track. When that happens, you slide your factory into the position with the earliest spot on the board, so it'll always be 2010s. Your second one would slide into, for example, 2020, so on and so forth. It's always in the latest spot. And that would be the action of building a power plant. And that's what you're going to be doing during the game. Now, this is the first player marker. And before we move on, I want to talk why infrastructure is important, and especially these UN cards. Now, in order to win the game, you will notice right here, all but 3 UN gold cards have to have been claimed. Now, in order to do that, You must pay, using one of your executive actions. You can pay to gain a UN card. You must have the infrastructure built for this card. In this case, it is 2 solar plants, 1 recycling plant. It costs 1 cube. This is for the competitive mode. The 2 that you can see right down there is the amount of victory points you gain in the cooperative mode. Now, blue ones always cost only 1 cube. And you notice that the power plant aspect is only in gray, meaning you do not have to have completed it. Any player may complete the plant, but to purchase the cards, you have to have your own infrastructure. Now, in the case of the white cards, you will see that they requires 2 cubes, but only 2 plants. That's very important to make sure that you do not lose the game. One of the things that happened to Julie and I during the game. Now, what will happen over the course of the game as you're taking actions, you do have this nice economic goal chart, and the game will say when you get to the end, to this phase right here, you should flip them over. Word of advice, flip them over while you complete them. So for example, if you complete a talk about water, you would flip both of those water tokens. Now I'm just trying to give you guys an overview. If you have any questions, please take a look at the rule book. What we're going to go through now are the other phases of the game. So keep it right here as we continue working hard to protect the Earth from the ever-rising levels of CO2. Before we move on to the phases of the game, I've just done a little bit of pre-work, but the one thing I wanted to talk about, because I realized I neglected to do it after building the power plant, is to discuss what happens when you control a region. Now in this case, I built the solar plant, which is the leftmost resource, the one that they want the most. I would then take the hexagon out here. That gives us control of the region. Now what that means is we can spend these CEPs with regards to building infrastructure or building power plants as if they were our own. We are not able to sell these for profit back to the market. Now, if you would like to sell a CEP, what will happen is we'll say that these are worth 6. You take one from your board, you sell it. It goes to the bank, not to the market. You then reduce the amount by 1, and you gain the dollar value. So in that case, it would have been $6. Now, we talked about control. Let's move on to the different phases of the game. Now let's take a look at the different phases of the game. Now, in a 2-player game, you're going to have 4 main phases. You can take a look at the board here. It'll tell you where to position your starting marker depending on the number of players. So once again, in a 2-player game, you get 4 of these phases, meaning you can perform 4 main actions and up to a total of 12 executive actions. You will not need to perform an executive action every turn. You really got to be smart about what you're trying to do. Next, we have the income phase. What the income phase is the player that is farthest along the tracks. I just have the blue tokens out now. You'll see it would be the blue player that's just racking up a lot of stuff. So in this case, it would be 4, 0. So that's another 3. So that's a total of 7. Plus another total of 7 points here, for a total of 14 income, which can be taken as dollars, and we take the money from the pool, or as victory points. Now, you might want to consider taking them as victory points. We're going to move on to the next phase of the game right here, which is verifying the economic goals, and I'll explain why. Now, during the economic goal phase, what you do is you add up all of these goals that have not been completed. In the year 2010, you're going to lose -1 point for each goal that is not completed. Now, what this means here is you got to get all the way to the end of one of the specific types of technology. This one here, which is a misprint, means you need to get halfway to the purple box on the technology track. So as you can see, you can easily lose, which each of these holding. So we've got 8 here, 8 here, 4 in the middle. I mean, that's about 20 points right there. In the case of what I've got on the board, I'm not really sure I could have actually gotten there, but it was just a good example. I would need, at least 20 victory points to handle all of that potential negativity. If you go below 0, you lose the game. Now the last phase is the carbon energy plant phase. We just slide this down and we'll go through what you can do with the carbon energy plant. Now we have this helpful bag. The bag is used to randomize all of these economic goals. You can also use it for the carbon energy plant. Just throw them in there, shake it up, and you'll draw them out. Now what you do is you take a look at what decade you're in. In this case, we're in the decade 2010, and you're going to draw one, and you place it on the board. Now, when you do that, you immediately place a CEP on it. If, for example, and we're just using a quick example, the blue player had control of South America, they would then place their control token. They are required to pay a penalty of one of their own CEPs to cover that new plant. Now, in the case that they were not able to, what you have to do is buy a CEP from the market. Doesn't matter if you don't have the money. And then you pay victory points equal to the current cost at the CEP market, meaning you could potentially lose up to 8 victory points and the game very easily. So keep an eye on who has control and manage your resources. Now you're going to continue around the board. Now in the case of Europe, where we built the solar plant, you would not be adding a carbon emission plant. What you then do is go to Africa. Once again, you place a CEP on it. We go to Asia. We go to Oceania, as well as North America. As you're doing this, you're going to be moving up the CO2 track here. So the first one, it was 20. We've got another 40 for 60. We've got another 30, so we're already at 490, plus another 70, which is going to put us up at 560. Now, we need to always be at 490. At 500, we lose the game. In order to do that, we once again have to spend victory points. Now, for every 10 that we want to go down, in 2010 it costs 1 point, 2022, 2033, 2044. So, in this case at 560, we need to spend 7 victory points to stay alive. So keep this part in mind, manage your goals, it's very important. What then happens with all of the CEPs that are on these plants, they are penalties, they go out of the game, back to the bank, and that essentially reduces the amount of value you can get for proposing a project. We'll just move that out there because that wasn't supposed to be there. And then after that happens, we will then start another decade, and the round will start over, and you will keep going. Now, in order to win the game, you must survive all 4 decades. Make sure that you have completed one of these private goals, and most importantly as well, claimed all but 3 of these UN cards. So that's how you play CO2 Second Chance. I tried to give you guys just a quick, nice overview of the game. I'm not sure how quick it actually was. As you can see, there's lots of moving parts of the game, but stay tuned as Julie and I are going to be back with our review of the game. CO2 Second Chance. What did you think of the game?
It's definitely an interesting context, and as you said at the beginning, very different from anything we've played before. It's a huge board, lots of pieces, and as you guys have heard me say before, Jason always learns the game before and then explains it to me. So I sat down at the table and I look at all the pieces, I go, oh boy, and he starts explaining and I say, I don't understand what the point is. So I have to say, I got the gist of it. I think once we actually started playing, I would say the first time we played, we survived 2 decades. We did not survive the second decade.
We lost in the second decade. We made a mistake, and I think this is a good time to just talk a little strategy for people that are curious about that, and then I'll let you continue. I think we both agree that you really need to map out what you're going to do. Our last game that we played, we had a really good game going, and if we honestly had one more round, we would have won the game.
Yeah, not another decade, just one extra play.
Yeah, one time to play. A lot of people have said that they have difficulties getting out of the first decade. Key things to remember to get out of the first decade. Your income does not have to be money. Using income as victory points is very important. Getting scientists, or at least having a player get scientists early on, which we did on 2 different occasions, can really help boost your income, which is crucial to surviving the decade. Also, plan out your economic goals. Beating those economic goals, as many of them as fast as possible, really helps survive into the next round. On our second play, we actually didn't turn any of our income into victory points, but we got lucky with the tiles that came out for the economic goals, and we just were able to crush through a lot of them and do very well.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think you said it in the intro. It really is a puzzle. How many times did we play? We played 4 times.
Yeah.
We kind of won once.
Yeah.
But
we made a couple of mistakes on that one because it was really our second learning game. And I do believe if we played it properly, there was one rule we accidentally omitted. We probably would have won.
Yeah.
We won fairly handedly in the 4th decade, but we can't count it as a win because we didn't play properly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's important, first of all, to really understand there's some of those things that weren't clear about using the, what were the purple things called?
The carbon energy permits, the CEPs. And the reference part of the rule book is a must, and it's a lifesaver. You're probably going to need the rule book nearby for every playthrough, unless you play it so much that you're actually able to memorize the game. And one thing I think we should just speak on quickly before I forget is you get a lot of value in this box. You get a solo game, cooperative game, and a semi-cooperative competitive game. And I even think the semi-co-op could be pretty fun because you still have to work together. Now you're trying to score the most victory points, but you're not really able to stab someone in the back entirely in this game, because if you do, everyone just loses, so no one's winning.
Yeah, so I mean, I think as you maybe give yourself, if I can give a piece of advice, the first time you play, there are some things you're not supposed to do. Like you're not supposed to talk about the cards that you pick up that are in your hand. I think that's probably something the first time you want to play, you want to talk about it just so you're not working to opposite goals and you know what each other is trying to do. The game's hard enough as it is. I don't think that makes I don't think it's an extra burden that you need to give yourself.
No, and I would have to agree. I mean, you're figuring out the game, and we really talked about our goals during our first 2 games. We got an idea what the different goals are. It gave us a good example of how we can tell what the other player is going for without really communicating it. And then our last game, we really didn't do that. And, well, Julie succeeded at one of her goals. I failed at one of mine. And she was missing 1 tech cube to really keep going.
Yeah. I think the other thing is the UN cards. It's a balancing act and it's a puzzle because the UN cards are also one of the components that you need to be able to achieve.
You can't have any more than 3 UN cards left at the end of the game. So you have to get them. There's no going around it.
Yeah. So that's it. Our last game, we had all of the things necessary to be able to acquire it. I just didn't have a tech cube to be able to buy it. I ran out of those cubes. Otherwise, besides Jason missing
one carbon energy permit.
And my tech cube, we could have won that one. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. You can't just go out and generate just money. You can't just generate scientists. You can't just do talks. You can't just build plants. You really have to try to balance it out. And honestly, it is very challenging. it's quite. I think it's to coin the phrase, that way maybe it is a brain burner. You sit there trying to figure out how you're going to do it, and it definitely does require some brain power. You can't just kind of graze your way through it. I think one of the negatives for me is that despite all of the complexity and all that, there's still an element of luck to it. And I think one of the things we talked about is in our different playthroughs, we got different cards that we picked up that were better than others.
Not necessarily better, but they were stronger in the situation that we found ourselves in. Yeah. Because our first playthrough, Julie had a lot of money generating cards. I had a lot of cards that were more dedicated to summits, and what actually worked out well was she was generating her own money. I cranked up the income track and was handling all of her tech, and it worked fairly well. But in our last game, we had a lot of summit cards, and we both did, and we were kind of missing that little extra bit of money, mainly because of the different economic goals we were trying to accomplish, and the UN cards we got were pretty terrible. Like, for the variety of economic goals that we had to complete and talk about, we did not have the UN cards where it was easy for us to build the infrastructure, then have somebody build the plant and purchase the card.
As much, and I think that's one of the negative things for me, is those UN cards, whether you're accomplishing 2 things or 3, they're worth the same number of victory points. And to me, if you're going to have to accomplish 3 things to be able to get it, I'd like an extra victory point, or have one less for the one that's only 2. I just feel like you should be getting extra victory points for those UN cards to get,
But you do get a lot more points for those, but in the cooperative games, since they're working together, that's why they're only worth 2. It's to make the game harder because it's a co-op.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we haven't played the semi-competitive, and I don't think you've played the solo.
No, I've not done either. This game is a beast, and since Julie brought up negatives, one thing I will say, setup and teardown is long. There's a lot of different components, and the first time setting it up with the rulebook kind of going over, took me about 40 minutes. If you're going to learn the game, set aside some time. It is going to take you most of an afternoon. Now, if you're familiar with CO2, since this is the second chance, the second version of the game, you should be fine. It just has a much nicer looking board. A lot of the stuff has been cleaned up. You're going to be good to go. But for new players, it is going to take some time.
I think one of the things for me looking at it, and when you have your board and there's a lot of information on your player mat, and then there's a lot of information on the board, and some of it is repetitive.
Yes.
I think I would have preferred that they remove the information from one of the 2 places. It just felt completely overwhelming sitting down to the game the first time because there was so much information.
I honestly think one thing that would have been nicer, I would have, and this is just personal preference, it really doesn't affect the gameplay, I would have liked to have something a little bit more intricate for the player board. I find the board very beautiful while the player board is rather dull. It would have been nice to maybe have something that really showcases a specific energy company, something that was fun, some new art, and then have almost like a reference card or a reference piece that you could put next to the board that would have just all the information big with the different components on it. The board has already taken up a lot of space. I think it's something that could have been pretty cool, and then you could also have shrunk down the player board. But that's just really a little bit more nitpicking, but it is one thing that I do agree with. There was a lot of duplication, and when you're sitting down to learn the game, it is very off-putting. I was very confused as I was setting it all up. As I'm reading the rule book, it all started falling into place, but it's not the easiest.
Yeah, so it definitely, it's got pretty colors, and it's in the pieces, or the production value is nice.
So let's talk about, we kind of been going off on sort of the negatives and the challenges of the game itself in terms of playing it. Let's talk about the positives of the game.
Well, and that's what I was getting into. I think it's pretty, it's colorful, it's got a good production value. It's an interesting concept. I think it's an interesting idea to be trying to, save the planet and see how everything really is working against you when it comes to the carbon emitting factories, and you can't build everything, and you can't get everything out at the same time.
No, and you really can't solve the problem. It feels very real. I like that because it feels like what we're dealing with in society today. And I think this game is definitely a little bit of a commentary on it, is that unless things change, the way things are going
across the world. You can't just fix things in North America or Oceania or Europe. You got to fix them everywhere.
And I actually like the fact that you cannot get ahead of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You really are. It's all about managing the problem. And on our first play, I think that's really where we made a mistake. We didn't really figure it out. We thought that we could, beat the game. You're not beating this game. This is almost like a survival game. You're trying to survive 4 decades and improve the planet and meet the goals of the UN. And you really got to think about it that way, because I felt that you got frustrated almost first couple of times. You're like, what? I want to do more. And then after we really looked into it a little bit more, you're like, you know what? This makes sense. I mean, I could be wrong, but I really feel that the theme of the game is very evident. The game captures the theme and it plays to the theme. This is probably the most thematic game that we own. I can't think of anything that is more thematic than this in terms of having a goal, executing it, and also making it feel very real at the same time.
Yeah. It was definitely frustrating at a lot of junctures. I just felt like we didn't get to do enough, and in that point, it is very thematic. You have to be patient, and you have multiple steps before you can get to build your plant. It takes a lot of steps and a lot of time, and you basically can build one plant in a decade. That's how long it takes. So. And in any case, there's a lot of good things. I think most of it is the concept and the fact that it's thematic. I think the complexity is also something interesting. It's definitely not easy. I think that the luck factor of the cards, is a give or take. I mean,
it's not too high on the luck factor, because even though you felt like we had some really terrible cards, as you pointed out, some better planning in Decade 1, and we would have been able to beat the game. The one thing I would tell anyone that is learning this game, take your time, count things out, also plan for the worst case scenario. And the first few playthroughs, don't be afraid to take something back. If you have to change your decision to take income into victory points to stay alive, I suggest you do it. We did it during our first playthrough, because otherwise you're going to find yourself frustrated, losing. So take your time to figure it out. But that being said, on later plays of the game, don't do any takebacks. Play it properly. But there's definitely a system and a level of understanding that I think is required with this game as a first-time player. And that's just my recommendation. You don't have to take my advice. If you like it punishing and you like potentially losing very easily, well, there you go.
You'll learn by your failures.
Yes. I think we pretty much covered everything,
Yep.
Julie, don't you?
Yep. So you want to start with your rating, or you want me to?
I'll let you start with your rating.
So I'm giving it a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And the 7 is based on the fact that I like the concept. I like the fact that it's very different from anything we've played before. For me, and I rate this way, Jason rates differently, but I like to rate based on my enjoyment factor of the game. I think for me, it is a very complex game that requires a lot of brain power, and I like my games a little less complicated because I use my brain enough at work. I like to be able to just relax and not have to, plan 8 moves ahead.
And I loved how you got into it, though. I really wanted to put it out there.
I did get into it, and I did enjoy it. If I didn't, it would be a much lower score. So I think it's more the fact that this feels very difficult. And, we played it 4 times and won once when we were on flex rules. So I can't even say we actually really ever won the game. There's only one other game I can think of that really beat us continuously, and that was Thanos Rising.
Yeah, and that was bad luck on the die rolls. All right, if I just don't roll this one die, we're good. So what is our chance of winning? Our chance of losing 1 in 60. That one thing comes up and we get murdered.
Yeah, so that one was frustrating because we were never winning it, but it didn't feel like I just couldn't figure it out. It's just bad rolls of the die. In this case, it was frustrating because it's like, is there a way? What am I missing to be able to, to survive this or to do things a little differently. And you know what? We probably could play another 2 or 3 times, and we probably would figure out the finesse of it. And it might depend on the cards that you pull, and it might, but that's my reason for my 7.
No, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a higher score because I almost didn't back this on Kickstarter. I was really debating it, and then finally go, you know what? It's co-op. It's completely different than almost everything else we have in our collection. And I said, why not? Let's do something that's cooperative, that we're both going to get the chance to play, that's just out of left field for us. And I got to say, I'm giving this an 8. And this could have actually got a much higher score. And the reason why I would have almost considered giving it a 9 because of everything that you get in the box. Because of the solo and the semi-competitive game. You're almost getting 3 games in one. There's different cards for everything. So everything plays a little bit different. Don't really know exactly how different, but there's enough that you can see it in the box. But what really keeps it from getting to that high level for me, I'd have to say, is there's a couple things that about the rule book that I don't like with regards to the layout. It's all in there. You can find it. It's not overly difficult, but I'm not a huge fan of the layout. The other thing that is a little bit of a negative for me, well, actually, no, it's a big negative for me, so much so that I'm knocking it down a whole point on my scale.
Setup time.
Setup and teardown is really, really long. And that's something that I don't like because, especially at least in this household, maybe different in other gaming households, is that I do a lot of the setup and the teardown when it comes to just getting everything going. Julie's very good at helping me finish things off or getting everything organized so I can put it away, but it still takes a while. And as one thing you can see here, and the box was designed like this, that's why it's nice, and I'll just tip it a little bit, but you can see it doesn't even quite close despite the nice organizer and things like that. There was also a couple of misprints that are in the game. If you're curious, you can look at on Board Game Geek. I'll actually post a link in the video description for the errata. But it's an 8 because I think you're getting a lot of value in this box. I'm interested to see what's going to happen when Stronghold Games brings it out, how much it's actually going to be. Until then, I can't really tell you if it's worth the money. If they put it in at probably about a $60 price point, I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this.
So, on that note, as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget the notification button so you can find out when we have new content for you. Did I forget anything? Oh, the links to the videos. Yeah. So you'll have links popping up at the bottom. This is very different from anything else, so I don't know what Jason's going to pick to link to, but something interesting.
I don't know, maybe Century Spice Road. They both start with the C. One's on the light end, the other one is all the way on the other end.
Okay. So surprise, what's going to end up in the link. But on that note, we're going to grab our drinks.
Grab our best friend.
All right, keep playing games.
We're going to keep playing games. And the one thing I got to say that I really like about this game is that I know you don't love it because it's a brain burner, but one of the first things you said even after we lost was like, next time we're going to figure this out. And next time we need to do this. And the fact that it makes you want to take it back out, even though it was a challenging and brain burner experience, means that they really did something right here.
Oh, I agree. I just had enough for this weekend, and
I kind of agree with you.
Can pull it out another weekend.